Good morning. Thank you for coming to our spring tree care webinar. This is the second in our series, VCE Loudoun Master Gardeners online. My name is Barbara Bailey. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator for the Master Gardeners. So I'm in charge of the Master Gardener program. Some little administrative things about the webinar. If you need to talk or if you want to chat and ask a question, there is a chat box at the bottom of the screen. Please go ahead and type your question in there. Carol will take questions at the very end. We have everybody muted so we don't interrupt our speaker. And also we don't have the video on. So Carol is going to be the only star that we see. So I would like to introduce Carol Ivory. She is from the class of 2005. She is also a certified tree steward, and she is definitely a tree hugger. So you're in for a real treat to have Carol talk to us today about spring tree care. So Carol, please take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Barbara, and good morning to everyone. I'm glad to see you here. In addition to being a tree hugger lifelong, I have also been, the landscape chair of my HOA for probably about the last 30 years. It seems like that, certainly. And so I have had a lot of experience doing sort of this spring tree care and walking around with arborists and assessing trees. So I have a lot of years of experience. Not a lot of formal training other than being a tree steward. So I'm going to talk about the things you should do for your trees now to make sure they start off the growing season successfully. We've had a mild winter and everything seems to be ahead of schedule this spring. I'm looking out the window here and looking at trees just flushing out, and not just the maples. I've got a hickory tree right out here, and it's really leafing out nicely, and a birch tree over on the edge, and that's got its little catkins hanging down. It's really getting a good start here. And then, of course, the azaleas in my neighborhood are beginning to bloom, and that's about a month early. So you want to assess your trees now before they leaf out too much, and you can really see what's going on with the limbs. We've had a beautiful spring so far, and we're trapped in our homes, so it's a perfect time to go out and spend some time examining our trees and seeing what's going on. So I'm going to focus on what you can do safely with your feet on the ground and without any power tools, because we don't want to send anybody to the ER. It's not a good time for that. Never a good time, but especially now. So, here we go. We're going to talk about 4 steps for spring tree care. And when I did some online research to make sure I was covering all the bases, I encountered a recommendation that I would advise against. A lot of these websites are sponsored by various corporations, and they tell you time to fertilize your trees. Well, the master gardeners and the tree stewards will tell you that most trees and shrubs do not need any chemical fertilizer, and that proper mulching should address any nutrient problems that a tree or shrub might have. Now, some shrubs require a particular soil pH, so your azaleas might look a little peaked. Their leaves might not be as green as you'd like. So before you do anything, get a soil test and an analysis to make sure that you're doing the right thing, and often proper mulching can take care of that soil nutrition problems. Remember that fertilizer is not a plant food. Plants make their own food. That's what photosynthesis is. So fertilizer is a chemical that forces plants to grow. And trees maintain a very delicate balance between their leafy canopy and the woody parts and the roots. And each supports the others, and they have to be in balance. So fertilizer can force a spurt of growth in the canopy, but the tree will struggle in the long run if the roots can't support the new growth. So please remember this if you are advised to fertilize your trees by a lawn care company. I know that they do routinely advise you to fertilize your trees, and I'm sure they mean well, but I think it's mainly a money-making scheme. I know that because my son-in-law used to call me every year and say, you know, the lawn care company says to fertilize my trees. I'd say, no, don't do that. I think he finally got rid of the company. Okay, so the first thing is you want to do is clean up. And remember, you want to inspect and mulch. So you need to clean the area around the base of the tree so you can inspect it, and under the entire tree so you can mulch properly. So you'll want to pick up the branches and the twigs and anything that's under the tree, and then rake, because you want to really examine the base of the tree. So you want to clear all that debris away. Now, a lot of people assume that because trees are big, strong structures, that they have really formidable roots. But tree roots really do not compete well with other plant roots. So for the health of your trees, you shouldn't have anything growing under them. There should be no ground cover under your tree, no ivy, no pachysandra, no vinca, and no grass. I know that's a tough bullet to bite, but and you spend so much time getting grass to grow under your tree. Remember that trees and grass have completely opposite needs, and they're really very incompatible. And amazingly, the grass will cause more harm to the tree than vice versa. And besides competing with tree roots, ivy and pachysandra can also harbor fungus and rodents. So there are a number of reasons to clear away either English ivy or pachysandra or any kind of ivy from under your trees. And also, if your property is prone to poison ivy, like our HOA backs right up against the woods, and we often have poison ivy popping up in our yards, be very careful when weeding under trees, because those little twigs, the poison ivy hasn't leafed out yet, so you can't identify it from its leaves. And those little twigs and roots that you might encounter have that oil in it, and you can get the poison ivy, you can get the rash from it. So wear gloves, and guess what? Don't touch your face. So be careful of poison ivy when you're weeding around your trees. And you want to clear to the drip line. This is your drip line. If you have a small tree, you have a small area. If you have a large tree, it can be huge. It can encompass almost your entire yard. So take a look where the limbs, where the branches end. And if it rained, and if it were a light rain and you were standing under the tree, you wouldn't get wet. But if you walked out, you'd get wet. That's where the drip line is. So that's an important point to know. Even though the roots will extend far beyond the drip line, what's there under the drip line should definitely be cleaned up and mulched. So be aware of the drip line for any trees that you have in your yard. So then you're going to inspect. If you have a young tree and it's staked, please give serious consideration to whether or not those stakes and the cabling can be removed. In the long run, this isn't good for the trees. If you've got to inspect it all the time, is it too tight? The trees really need to be able to sway a little bit in the wind in order to increase its strength and get strong. So we don't really want to keep a young tree staked for very long. For your young and small trees, inspect with your pruners in hand and snip any dead or broken twigs. But be careful. Right now, many trees and shrubs are just beginning to break dormancy, and you have to look very closely to determine what simply hasn't put out leaves yet and what's actually dead. You can usually tell by the color of the twig. It'll be darker. The buds won't show any green or any growth. Right now, like redbud and beautyberry, a lot of those lower limbs on the redbud, even though the redbud is blooming, the lower limbs just look all dead. And many of them are actually. Redbud do that. They kind of die off at the bottom. So if the twig is alive, give a very small and gentle scrape with your fingernail to see if there's any green under the bark, and that's then your test for whether or not it's alive. Look for dead and dangling broken limbs, and if it's on a larger tree, start making your list for what you want an arborist to come in and do. Prune anything that you can reach safely. Now get out your binoculars and examine the limbs of your larger trees. My arborist said he liked to lay down on the ground, just look up into trees. But what you're really looking for are dead limbs and limbs with fungus. I've got some pictures here at the bottom of different kinds of fungus. If a tree's been struck by lightning, it's going to die, but it may take years to die. So what you've got to start looking for is dead limbs up there on that tree. And if those dead limbs are over a sidewalk, over the roof of your house, over your driveway, over people's cars, you've really got to move quickly and take care of that limb before it falls and causes damage. This is a job for an arborist. The other thing you should look at when you're looking up at big trees is clearance from your house. People have different standards. In our homeowners association, we use 15 feet. So tree limbs should be 15 feet away from the walls of your house and from the roof of your house. Remember, tree limbs dragging around on your roof can damage your shingles. Not good. Now the next thing is to look at sort of correct minor problems with the way things are growing, especially on a young tree, a small tree. This is a small sour cherry tree that was just planted last fall. Its owner is very excited because she's actually got some little blossoms here. But here's a problem. And these look like little twigs now, and this is the time to prune them before they get any larger. They will grow into large limbs. They are crossing. This is on the outside of one outside edge of the tree, and it is growing into the center of the tree. This little branch is opposite, doing the same thing. They're both growing in toward the center of the tree, and they're crossing. And when they get a little bit larger, if they aren't rubbing now, they will rub. So it's real easy now just to take some hand pruners and snip these little twigs off. And this can take you quite a while to inspect a smaller tree, a dogwood, a redbud, serviceberry, anything that's growing in your yard that you can reach easily, and take care of those. Now there are other minor problems. Here's suckers. This is some suckers growing from the base of a redbud. And suckers can grow out of either the base of the tree or off the limbs of the tree. And some tree species sucker more than others. Fruit trees sucker mainly along the larger branches, and those suckers don't produce any fruit, and you want to get rid of them so that all the energy in the tree goes to producing fruit. For ornamentals, you don't want this little ring of suckers around the base of a tree. Little leaf lindens. This is not the native linden, but the European linden. The little leaf linden is just horrendous for producing suckers at the base of the tree. So clear all those off. Now, this is a little serviceberry tree, and this is a before and after shot. There's just way too many stems growing here, and a lot of them are poorly formed, growing in the wrong direction. Some have been broken, and now they've got another little twig going off in the wrong way. So I cleaned it up, and I used pruners. I used ratcheted pruners, and I used my little hand saw just because some were growing so close to others that I needed the saw to get to it. So I had cleaned it up here, and then I examined it, decided what I wanted to keep and what I wanted to get rid of. And you can see there's some little limbs here that I cut off because it was growing in toward the center. I've cleaned this up, but let me show you what I found when I was cleaning it up. So this is right next to the parking lot, and this caused me to remember that several years ago, a neighbor's teenage son was backing in a U-Haul trailer and backed right over this little serviceberry tree and badly scraped a lot of the stems. And this shows the decay that was starting inside these along where the bark was stripped off. It was on this one and then over here on this one. Now you see, this is a large limb. This is one of the 3 largest limbs or shoots or trunks, whatever you call them, on this little tree. And it also has this scar on it. And it made me decide to keep these 2 just in case. I mean, we're never going to be on the garden tour, so this doesn't have to be perfect. And I thought, well, you know, in case this really starts to decline, I want to have at least this little trunk over here to help round out the tree. You also see this kind of damage where there's been a large planting of trees. When we were out looking at the trees on Battlefield Parkway, and those maples had been planted by a crew of people, and the trees were loaded on a truck, and they would pull the tree off. They'd strip all the bark off the tree, down one side of the tree. And there were some maple trees that were, I don't know how old, but these kind of scars never go away. The tree is scarred for life like this. And it is an area that is prone to rot. So you want to avoid damaging trees by either pulling them off of a truck or running over them, obviously, with a car. So, yeah. Okay. This is where trees are the happiest. This is a woods. And just laugh about the, trees are kind of like dogs. They just like to be running around out there in the woods, and growing together. They're not spaced out. Trees do fine in the woods if they're growing on top of each other. They work it out. And you can see that there's no ground cover. There's nothing green there on the ground. There's no grass. And the leaves, it's a rather shallow leaf covering. And this is a reminder of why you should never dump your yard waste or your leaves into a nearby woods. Because the woods can take care of the leaves that naturally occur there. But it takes them a really long time to take care of extra leaves that have been dumped in the woods. And those leaves will bury any little wildflowers or any young growth. And also it will start to change. It will pile up around the tree and really create like volcano mulching effects. And we have had in our neighborhood, because there's often like a little drop off from the backs of people's houses into the woods, lots of leaves get blown over there. And on a couple of occasions, we've had to remove large oak trees that had rot at the base. And I'm sure it's from too many leaves just piled around the trunks of trees. We had one tree that rotted out and it didn't blow over in a storm. It just very gently fell over onto a house, and it fell so gently, all it did was sort of damage the gutters. But we had to get a crane in to actually remove the tree because it was around in the back of the house. The other thing I want to point out is that years ago, our forests didn't look like this. You'll notice that there's no undergrowth. There are no young trees here, and that's because of our heavy deer population. There is nothing tastier to a deer than a young oak tree. And our forests are not regenerating themselves anymore because of the deer population. I don't know what's going to happen, but that's it's kind of sad. Normally there should be young oak trees growing here. Okay. Mulch is a naturally occurs in forests, and it's been described as a nutrient-rich, moisture-absorbent bed of decaying forest leaves, twigs, and branches, teeming with fungal, microbial, and insect life. So the woods provides natural mulch, and natural mulch is the best thing you can do. So here are some materials that you can use around your trees and shrubs. I got this article, it's part of an urban forestry series of articles, and it really recommends pine needles. That the pine needles retain moisture, suppress weeds, they create a good nutrient balance, and they are least likely to alter the pH of the natural soil. So I hadn't really used pine needles as mulch, but this article really recommends them. To the right is a photograph of a mulch path that a neighbor has created using pine needles. And it kind of goes from her house out to her car through a naturalized area. And she goes out in the fall and sweeps up the pine needles and puts them down. And then I took this photograph just a few days ago. So this pine needle path has held up very nicely through the winter. You can see it's attractive. And it kind of reminded me that pine needles are certainly a good thing to mulch with. Apparently, you can get what they call pine straw in bales from places like Lowe's and Home Depot. I've never seen it there. I'll have to look. Shredded leaves are a favorite of mine. I actually have a leaf shredder, and because we more or less live in the forest, I don't have any shortage of leaves to shred. You can use grass clippings, but they will pack down too much if you don't mix them with other things. So you could mix them with leaves, you could mix them with aged wood chips, or any other kinds of chips. But you don't want to use just grass clippings by themselves because they will prevent because they pack so tightly, they'll prevent the flow of soil, not soil, excuse me, of water and air. And our tree roots need both water and air a lot. Wood chips are great. Very often you can get them for free from an arborist, but the problem is they have to be aged. You can't put green wood chips on top or around other living plants. So the arborist isn't going to keep them and age them for you. They'll want to dump them right from their truck. So you need to have sort of a pile of wood chips for about 6 to 12 months before you can safely use them. But they are very substantial. They don't wash away. They last a long time. They look nice. You want to inspect them or talk to the arborist and tell them that you don't want wood chips from when they've taken down trash trees, holly trees, a lot of weeds, honeysuckle. Those are the kinds of things you don't want. Ideally they've chipped up large hardwood trees. That's the best wood chips. And then small chippers that private landowners might have to chip up landscape waste, and that's something else you can use as mulch. Okay, so let's look about why are we mulching. This article that I have here that talked about the pine needles also said that mulched trees grow faster. So they grow faster than trees that don't have mulch around them, organic mulch. Trees that just have grass growing up to them, or trees that have some kind of ground cover or weeds under them, don't do as well as mulched trees. And that's because mulch provides various services. One is that as the mulch decomposes, it releases natural nutrients. And this is another reason why you shouldn't have to fertilize your trees, because if you're mulching them properly, they get the natural nutrients that they need when the mulch decomposes. Excuse me. Then also the mulch reduces the loss of moisture. It slows the flow of water, so water is retained right around the tree and can soak into the ground. You want the water to soak into the ground. That's we don't want it flowing away. The other thing is that mulch moderates the temperature extremes. Temperatures over 90 degrees in the summer, and in the winter, temperatures under 20 degrees can kill roots. And mulch is like insulation. So it moderates those extremes. And then finally, last but hardly not least, mulch protects the trees from lawnmowers and string trimmers, which just do amazingly bad damage to trees. So if you've got your tree mulched out 3 feet or more, that string trimmer is not going to get, there's no reason to go any closer to the tree, and it's not going to get hit. The bark is not going to be damaged. That's your goal. So let's look at proper mulching. We have the little drawing here on the left. The tree on the left is mulched properly. We tree stewards have a little poster that says mulch 333. It's 3 inches of mulch. That's mulch 3 inches deep in this area out here. This is the area that should be 3 inches deep. We mulch 3 inches away from the trunk, so there should be some clearance here. 3 inches away from the trunk. We don't want the mulch to touch the trunk of the tree. And then it should be at least 3 feet out, if not all the way to the drip line, whatever that is. You may end up mulching your entire yard if you have a small yard and a large tree. But so it's 333 at minimum as far as the width of this mulch ring around your tree. With mulch, more is not better. You don't want any more than 3 inches of mulch, because that can actually keep the water from reaching the roots. And it can also cause the roots to grow up into the mulch. That's the problem with this volcano mulching, which is actually about one of the worst things you can do to a tree. It minimizes the air and the water that can get to the tree. It holds moisture against the trunk of the tree, which you don't want. The trunk of the tree should have good airflow, and it should be dry, or you're going to get fungus and rot in your tree trunk. The other thing is that, boy, there's nothing but little rodents, little voles and mice and all kinds of things would just love to dig into here and then chew on the tree. Trees get killed this way. Rodents will girdle the tree and kill it. So you don't want to harbor little creatures in all that pile of mulch. But probably the worst thing is that the tree roots actually grow up into this mulch, and you don't want tree roots above the soil line. You want tree roots that go deep into the ground. So this is really terrible. When I was out looking at the trees in the woods, I was really fascinated by the fact that trees somehow manage to do this naturally themselves. All the big trees, they all have, they don't have leaves piled up against them at all. I'm wondering if if rainwater doesn't run down the trunk of the tree and then kind of wash the leaves away, or what. But I looked at any number of large trees, and they all have this little clearing around them, so that the leaves are not piled up against them. See, moss is okay. Moss on the tree is okay. And this is some lichen on the trunk of the tree. That's not the bad fungus stuff. That's just lichen growing on the bark of the tree. Um, so this is a beautiful, healthy oak tree in the woods. And it has managed to mulch itself properly. It's amazing. Okay. So watering. If you ever buy a tree that's been dug up and it has the burlap around it, you take the burlap off, and you should always do that. And look, you'll see these big roots that come right directly out of the trunk of the tree, and then hopefully the tree will have a whole lot of little fine roots. These little fine roots are the only roots that can absorb water. So this is where you need to concentrate your watering. So if you have a mature tree, you don't want to water right by the trunk, because right by the trunk are all those big supporting roots. You want to water out farther, and you want to water all the way out and consider the whole drip line and beyond the drip line, because the roots of the trees can extend 1.5 to 4 times the width of a tree canopy. Those tree roots are way out there, and those are the roots that absorb the water. So when you're watering a mature tree, you don't water right up against the trunk of the tree. You water way out here. And if you have a young tree, you still consider watering out a little bit from the tree to get the roots to grow out, and that there should be some roots out there now. I kind of wonder about those tree gators that people use, and if they're really getting the water in the right place. Now, it seems like we've had a lot of rain, but in the spring it can be really, really tricky. We can suddenly go for a couple weeks and not have any rain. It can really suddenly get dry. And if you have a newly planted tree, a young tree, you really need to be very, very conscious of the amount of rain that we've had and of any short dry spells, because in the spring it can get really hot for a few days, and the ground can dry out, and if you don't get out there and water, you can damage your new trees. So that pretty much runs through the 4 steps. Now, when to call an arborist? Certainly if you need to remove a tree. And sometimes I'll say to people, you know, you really want to get somebody who's insured and has a legitimate business before you ask them to remove a tree. And especially if the tree could potentially fall on a house or a fence or anything and cause any damage. You want to get someone who knows what they're doing and who has insurance and whose contact information you have before they cut down the tree that falls on your house. This all happens, really. You want to call an arborist for any work that requires climbing. And normally this slide says any work that requires using a chainsaw above your waist. But right now, I'd say don't use a chainsaw, no power tools, just for your own safety. Call an arborist if there's evidence of disease or rot. They can assess it better than you can. They can look at the base of the tree and say, is it time for this tree to go or not? And if you have any questions about safety, please call an arborist. And I think it's time for questions. Are there any questions? Barb, are there any questions?
We don't have any so far.
Can we unmute people?
Well, there's none in the chat box.
Do people know where the chat box is?
Yes, I went over that. So if someone, you go down to the bottom and you'll see a little chat sign. If someone has a question for Carol, please let us know. I think you went over everything so thoroughly that everyone will be a proper tree steward.
Oh, I can't believe it.
It was excellent. It's very good. Very good. So we would hope that everybody would go out to their HOAs and tell them they're mulching their trees wrong.
Yes.
Common area has volcano mulches.
It's really hard to find that. You have to go to the top of the company that supervises the people, the very top. You can't talk to the individual workers because they've been told what to do. Yeah. Any questions at all? Okay.
Doesn't look like it. So if you have friends or family that want to learn more about trees, this presentation will be given again at 2 o'clock. So you can forward them the link and maybe they'll have some questions for Carol. But I want to thank everybody for joining us. And we do continue with the Master Gardener series over the course of the next few weeks. So please look at our webpage, loudouncountymastergardeners.org, and you will see on the calendar that we have all of the Zoom sessions listed there. We do have a question now that says, how do you identify an arborist? If you would like to field that.
Oh, okay. And arborists have their certificate, they have a certification number. I like to do word of mouth and get recommendations because there's all kinds of arborists, and you know there are some arborists who've never met a tree they didn't want to cut down. So you can call the help desk. Do we still have a list of arborists at the help desk?
We can email the help desk at this time.
Oh, I'm sorry. Email the help desk. Yes.
I'm writing the address. And
You
they advise on some of the arborists. We'll give you a list of 3 to 5 arborists.
Yeah. Sometimes you walk around and or you're driving around. Arborists are still out there working, definitely. And you see the truck, and sometimes their certification will be right there on the truck. Or you talk to some other HOA and see if they're happy with their arborist. So you don't want a guy with a chainsaw. You want a trained certified arborist. They have to pass an exam, and they have to keep their certification up to date, just like any other professional.
Right, so we have another question. So if you could pick some of your, maybe 5 of your best natives, that would be a nice input to this.
Okay, I like river birch. They get a whole lot bigger than you think they're going to get. They're a real big tree. So they're great, but, and I know some people complain that they're messy. I don't mind. They're a great wildlife tree. They grow pretty fast, and they are big trees. I like a sweet bay magnolia. It's a small multi-stem tree, and they're tough as nails. I've got them growing. I planted some. I ignore it. The one that's some distance from my house, I put it in the ground and ignore it, and it's doing great. The serviceberry are also very tough. I really like dogwood, and if you plant it in a pretty sunny area with a good air circulation, they will not get the anthracnose, and they are wonderful. Of course, I love oak trees, white oak, red oak. They are really the mainstay of our whole ecosystem in this area, because they support so many of the caterpillars, and the caterpillars feed the baby birds. So that's really critical. Maple trees are very overused, and if we ever get a maple disease, it'll just march right down so many streets and kill every tree. I really hesitate against planting a maple. A black gum is a nice tree. It's pretty hardy. Is that enough?
I think that's good.
Okay.
So thank you. I don't see any further questions. So at this time, we will end the meeting. Thank you,
Okay.
Carol, very much.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.